All right, good morning, everybody. It looks like the list of names is kind of steadied off for now. So thanks for everybody for joining us this morning. This is our second PFMC update for this week. So we are going to start. I'm going to pass over to Derek to start out with some modeling updates for this morning.
Thanks, Kirsten. Last night there was a Chinook model run that occurred. There were a few changes in the ocean as well as changes in Puget Sound that occurred. And maybe to quickly go through what those were, there was a change in the non-treaty ocean quota from 85,000 to 80,000. The treaty quota remains at 50,000. As far as changes to Puget Sound go, we did do kind of a few model corrections to align the Chinook fisheries with the coho fisheries. If folks remember, there were kind of some changes that we made in some of our last coho model runs. We had October 1 through 15 added on to Marine Area 5 and 6. We had the full September modeled as being open to coho retention in Marine Area 7. And there was also a small change to 8.2. So as we've updated the model run, the Chinook run now kind of includes those pieces that, if folks remember, they weren't in the model run previously. There were some changes to some in-river fisheries, particularly for the Nooksack Springs. The ceremonial subsistence fisheries were reduced by the tribes yesterday, as well as there was also a small reduction to the in-river sport fishery input. There was a change to the Puyallup River input, as well as the 10-11 net inputs, and those were, as regional bios had identified an error in those, they were corrected. There was also a reduction in the Nisqually tribal in-river fishery for the hatchery selective net fishery. So we can kind of explore how that's changed the modeling in this set of runs. And maybe with that, I will pull open the results of this modeling exercise on screen in just a second. So hopefully folks can see this coming up on screen now. Just Leah, maybe a confirmation to confirm that you can see it.
Yeah, it looks great. You might want to make it a little bit bigger if you can.
Right on. If folks note, we will see kind of over here, there's been a reduction in the Nooksack Spring ER, but we are still above this 10.9% objective. We're still above the 17% Southern US objective on Skagit Summer Falls. Stillaguamish still above its objectives as well. Snohomish over here, we have a 8.3% SUS objective or a 20% total objective. And then for Nisqually, you can see that the escapement has increased pretty drastically. We're at around 5,900 on the escapement, but that goal is still 6,300 there to make it above the LAT. And for Skokomish, we are still above the 50%. Folks might notice that the Lower Columbia Natural Tule ER is at 38.7%, which is above the 38% objective. So it's likely that there could be more shaping of fisheries to meet that objective. In preparation for today, what I've done is I've done a little bit of scenario modeling to look at and just kind of reconfirm where we might be on our Stillaguamish mortalities at the end of the process. And so it's always a little bit of an uncertain exercise when I do that. I have to take a look at and make guesses as to how other fisheries such as the ocean and treaty might shape up. Those aren't 100% possible to predict at the moment, but in some of the looks that I've done, I'm looking at us coming out around the end if there's equal sharing at about just over 92 mortalities. It looks like 92.7. So kind of that number of 92, 93 hasn't changed, I think, in kind of the set of model runs that we've gone through in the last few iterations. If I look at kind of the changes that we might need to achieve that 9% on unmarked and 14% on the marked Stillaguamish, that equal sharing of mortalities. Once I start looking at scenarios, I've been trying to look at how other stocks might pop out as either constraining or not constraining. And maybe the first one that I looked at, I would say, is Nooksack Springs in kind of an updated look. I've looked at for Nooksack Springs potentially next steps, and I considered a scenario where we close our in-river fishery for Nooksack Springs. I considered looking at a scenario where we were very near objectives on Stillaguamish, and without any marine area changes for non-treaty, that would make the Nooksack Springs objective approximately 0.3 to 0.6% over the exploitation rate. So as we shape kind of for Stillaguamish, that's a stock that we really should be paying attention to. Same type of scenario I've looked at for Snohomish, except not closing the in-river sport. We are also, like Nooksack Springs, we're going to come out somewhere above the objective of 0.3 to 0.6% to go on that stock. The full in-river impacts there are 0.2%, so that's not one where we can get a huge benefit from in-river changes there. For Nisqually, it's going to continue to be a constraining stock in the modeling. If we kind of look at what changes might be ahead, and once again, this is an approximation, so this could change, but anywhere between around 47.8 and 48.4% is what I'm preliminarily looking where we might shake out at the end. It would be an escapement somewhere between 5,900 and 6,000 fish. So the non-treaty fisheries there would have substantially more mortality than some of the treaty fisheries. If we were to fix that solely through in-river harvest rates, we'd have to drop our in-river harvest rate from 28% to somewhere between 15 and 17.5%. Not to put them on the spot, but Gabe, maybe did you want to describe what that might look like for an in-river fishery if you were to drop, to have such a big drop on the in-river harvest rate there?
Sure, yeah. So it would be a similar fishery to last year, and then we would probably look for a couple extra closure days essentially. So we might have to target a Friday or something that has just pretty good impacts.
Sorry, Gabe, how many days did you close last year versus like a recent year normal fishery in the Nisqually?
Yeah, so last year it was closed Sunday through Tuesdays in August, and then Sundays and Mondays in September, and then we had, if I remember right, the 25th, the 1st, and the 2nd closed. So those,
And normally those would have just been 7 days a week.
yeah, or we typically have Sunday, Monday closures to align with like the tribal fisheries and just reduce gear conflict. So
Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe.
yeah.
And so maybe just quickly mentioning two other stocks. Skagit Summer Falls is going to be exceeding its objectives, but many of those impacts are in river. I'm certain that if we're looking at the crafting, any additional benefits that we do that helps Skagit would be appreciated by the tribes there. For Skokomish, I think it's a little bit of a wild card, and it may come out after its objective once shaping occurs, but we probably have to have more discussions with the tribe in that region. So I'm going to put on screen in a moment, kind of as we're thinking about some of these stocks. I did try to develop a tool to help us with identifying where changes that we make in certain marine areas and time periods, how that benefits kind of some of these stocks that we're looking at holistically. And so I'll share that in just a second on screen. And I will blow it up. So give me 1 second too. So what we're looking at here, we're looking at kind of 4 different categories of things that might be constraining in our model runs. First of all, over here in these columns B to D that we have highlighted, we have those total Stillaguamish AEQs. In the next set of columns, we have the Nisqually exploitation rates. Column after that, Nooksack Spring exploitation rates. Column after that, Snohomish exploitation rates. And kind of as we're looking at each of these categories within, for example, the Stillaguamish total AEQs, we look here, the redder that a particular fishery and time period is, the more Stillaguamish AEQs it has. Similarly, as we start to look across the rows at exploitation rates, we can see the redder the exploitation rate, the bigger that exploitation rate is in a particular area and time period. So the reason why I thought that this would be a worthwhile visualization to look at is because it helps us to better understand where we are and where it might make the most sense to make changes as we're moving forward that benefits kind of each of these pieces. The one thing that really pops out to me, if folks might have remembered, is that we, this is a scenario, by the way, where we've closed freshwater sport for Nooksack Springs. But one thing that really pops out to me is Nooksack Springs, because if we're in a scenario at the end of this process where we would need to make up anywhere from 0.3 to 0.6 mortality ER on Nooksack Springs, unfortunately, the only place where we really see much of an ER on Nooksack Springs is in Marine Area 5 in the summer and the winter. So as I'm looking at this, and as I think that there's a potential that we could make up somewhere between 0.3 and 0.6 ER on Nooksack Springs, it's looking to me like that stock then becomes more constraining to us at this point than Stilly. And the reason why I say that is, say theoretically, if we were to look at Nooksack Springs in this winter time period and say we were going to take 3.5% out of that, that would equate to approximately 6 Stillaguamish mortalities over here. So that's more than we would need to do. Anyway, that's the idea behind this visualization. And once again, recognizing that exactly where we might need to be at the end, exactly where Nooksack Springs is, or Snohomish, or these other pieces is a little uncertain, as fisheries could be changing both in the ocean and on the treaty side as we're doing our own shaping. But I wanted to kind of present this tool and see if it could help us to get some discussion going. Any questions online?
I don't see any at the moment, Derek, but there we go. I was expecting at least one to shoot up. Gabe, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Has the spring treaty troll or the winter treaty troll been adjusted at all yet? I missed the first 2 minutes of the call.
It has not, Gabe. That's as I've been talking about these major uncertainties, that is one of the ones that exists in the scenario runs that I've been doing. I've been looking at a range of potential treaty troll options. That's why I've been presenting kind of a range of potential ERs where we might need to be at the end. But I have been factoring out, and I have been thinking about kind of potential changes ahead, recognizing that those are very uncertain, and I don't always get that correct. So
Understood. Thank you.
And that was the only hand for right now online.
I don't see any hands up in the room either.
So not seeing any hands raised. On next steps, I think we're going to be thinking a lot about Nooksack today. We'll probably meet with some of our regional staff to figure out what we might do there. But maybe I'll turn it over to Mark if he has see if he has anything else to add.
Glenn's got a question. Go ahead.
In regards to Nooksack Springs, but what I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, only if this becomes an issue, the only way to address it is to either close fishing completely in Nooksack and pretty much cut the winter fishery out of Area 5.
So I think the in-river fisheries, we're already factoring that out. Like
That's already factored.
yeah, we're gonna close that, but then there's still additional exploitation to make up.
And just what's changed from this year and last year? I mean, there's more. I mean, it seems to be more.
I think it's the half the Nooksack forecast. I mean, I think
The Nooksack forecast itself.
yeah, if I'm remembering things right.
You are.
Okay. I remember yesterday we had a co-manager meeting with those tribes. They said last year, I think it was, like 160 or something, and this year it's like 80 something like that. I mean, this year's forecast was a little more than half of last year.
Do we know what how the forecast actually ended up last year compared to pre-season forecast and what actually happened?
I'm guessing we're still compiling his statements, but Andrew may have a.
Yeah, it's a DNA based escapement, so we don't have all the data yet. They're working on it.
And we have another hand up online from Gabe. Gabe, go ahead.
Yeah, have we looked at what the impact in Marine Area 7 in the spring would potentially be on Nooksack Spring?
I have, Gabe. So to have 600 fish in Marine Area 7 in the winter would be approximately an impact increase of 0.1 on Nooksack Springs.
Thanks.
Derek, this is Pat Patillo. What are the impacts in the Area 5? I understand the Area 5 fishery has the highest impacts of non-treaty fisheries. What are they in the summertime versus the winter period?
For Nooksack Springs or for Stillaguamish?
Nooksack Springs, I thought that's what we were focusing on right now.
Yep, for Nooksack Springs, you can see kind of on screen here, just ballparking, there's about a quota of about 4,000 in the summer period, and that quota of 4,000 produces a Nooksack Springs exploitation rate of around 0.4. And in the winter time period, we have a quota of about 1,400, and it produces a Nooksack Springs exploitation rate of 0.7. So it's considerably higher in the winter than the summer period.
And then one more question is, is there any sharing agreement that's been discussed with the tribes for the Nooksack tribes for relative to last year or previous years or proportionally? I mean, I know that the impact is considerably higher for the tribes. And they have that pretty interesting special fishery in the river that's a selective fishery that has been going on for a number of years. I'm sure they want to keep that going, but what is the proportional amounts there? And I guess I'm asking, is there any agreement? That's the main question.
Well, I mean, there's no agreement per se on sharing of that exploitation. I think the tribes have actually really made room for our in-river fishery in the recent past. We never really fished on spring Chinook recreationally there. And we offered that opportunity to our anglers in the past few years. So they actually, in our meeting yesterday, they didn't tell us to close, but they said, we really think, looking at the exploitation that's there, thinking about the forecast for this year, they asked the question, does an in-river fishery really make sense this year? And I think that's where we took a step back and looked at it and said, yeah, probably not, given what we're expecting for returns. But then there's this additional piece here. I think we still have opportunities to have discussions with the tribes about that sharing and what that looks like, after we make these in-river moves. We'll see how everything models out and likely have some more discussions to come with floating in Nooksack. Thank you. Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I'm looking at that spreadsheet right there and, I'm completely baffled. I can add up all the rec fisheries on a squally right there and come up with 1.5% exploitation. And, what the heck are we supposed to do with that? Across all fisheries, 1.5%. So I'm asking, where is the exploitation on that fishery? Where's the rest of it? Is it Canadian? I mean, where is it happening?
You mean Nooksack Springs?
Yeah,
I mean, Nooksack Springs, yeah. Oh, okay, I was looking at Yeah, I was looking at Nooksack Springs, yeah. Where's the exploitation happening? I mean, you can't trim much off of 1.5% when it's spread across all fisheries, if I'm looking at that right.
Yeah, we don't have, our impact on Nooksack Springs is relatively low.
How about a tiny sliver of good news? Kirsten and I both had some hallway conversations with Puyallup and Muckleshoot. We did receive some favorable opinions about adjusting our winter opportunity more in the March and early April time period. So we haven't put it on the table yet, but we did have those hallway conversations. They were basically saying they didn't think it was going to be an issue because of our monitoring programs in place, and they felt comfortable that we had good things to be able to monitor that going forward. So
Yeah, I mean, we're virtually eliminated Nooksack Spring encounters from all fisheries compared to other fisheries that impact Nooksack Springs. I mean, we're 1.7%. It just baffles me that we would be asked to move further from that when there is directed fisheries on that run. So I'm a little bit baffled. I don't know. Sorry, I just can't even picture making any moves on that particular stock. But I understand you have a job to do that.
go ahead, Pat.
Mark, so I'm connecting the what you just said about Area 7, the winter fisheries anyway, assume that was the Area 7 fishery, a mark selected fishery in the winter time, in the March and April timeframe. That's
No,
what you
I
were
was
talking
speaking to 10 and
10 and
11.
11.
Oh, just 10 and 11.
Yeah,
Okay.
there had been discussion about shifting it from the
Was-
February 1 start to the March 1 start.
Yes. But has there been any discussion about the Area 7 winter fishery with the tribes yet?
No,
So if we, I thought I was connecting, I'm trying to connect the potential of with Nooksack, the impacts of that increasing. Surely there are impacts with the winter fishery proposal that we've been talking about. It could be that they could be sort of balanced like we had been talking about with Stillaguamish impacts, but I'm wondering if, like because it's not modeled, that it could surprise us. If that's still under consideration, the Area 7 winter fishery, it'd be good to look at whether or not the Nooksack Springs pop out as kind of some of those small stocks, like Stillaguamish, like Nooksack, they can surprise you in the modeling because of the Codewar tag data is a little bit squirrely when you expand fisheries from something in the past to something current, and with changes in the relative abundance of those stocks with mark selective fisheries. So I know that there would be some discussion about that today, that topic of Area 7, but this Nooksack thing might raise some particularly difficult issues associated with that. Just raising that.
yeah, and I don't know if you heard Derek describe it earlier, Pat, in our initial looks at it. That Area 7 proposal adds 0.1 to Nooksack Springs.
I didn't hear that. Okay, thanks.
Glenn,
What are some of the other big impacts that area I've had during the winter? Do we have big impacts on
Stilly.
This is the other one.
We don't get that big of a benefit from the other ones that we're looking at, Nisqually and Snohomish. It's, there's a small benefit to Snohomish, but if you made a really big change in Marine Area 5 winter, say say you cut half of it to take the full Nooksack out of that, you might get 0.1 on Snohomish, so it's not as large for that stock for sure.
If things go, I guess, just keep this on the radar, if things go to the point where area 5 is going to be eliminated, they're basically their winter fishery. Savings from the other stocks, and they be moved and used for, let's say, a summer fishery. Let's say for impacts, if we add some wild coho fishing in through September.
It's always something that we could, it's always something that we could take a look at in terms of Chinook impacts. We'd have to, of course, factor in about how any increases might affect things like Nisqually and Snohomish. In the summertime period for Marine Area 5 is the largest impact on Snohomish of the ones that we've got remaining, and maybe the third largest on Nisqually. But we can take a look, Glenn.
And we have a couple hands up online before you go to the next person in the room.
Okay, just a heads up for everybody who's online right now. Derek actually needs to leave to head to a co-manager meeting, and some of us do as well. If you have specific modeling questions, I recommend that you shoot us an email and we can get back to you on those. But if there are non-modeling questions that I can answer so Derek can run off to the meeting, then happy to take those now. Otherwise, like I said, you can just email those in.
The hands online were for Derek. They're down.
He wants to talk to me this morning. No, that's totally okay. So we do have a co-manager meeting that we all have to run off to. So again, if there's other questions, please feel free to email. For those folks who do have my email, my phone number is on there too. You can always give me a call. And I heard there about the modeling online. We will get those modeling results up online today so that everybody has a chance to take a look at those. So again, apologies that we have to run off this morning to a co-manager meeting. There's a lot more to come. So just like I said, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to shoot me an email, and we will be back here again tomorrow morning. Thanks, everybody.